The City of Plymouth City Council special meeting for Wednesday, March 29th, 2023 is now called to order. Members of the public participating electronically via Zoom and wishing to speak may do so during public comment by using the raised hand feature on Zoom. When dialing into Zoom at the phone number listed on your phone, use *9 to raise and lower your hand. Use *6 to mute and unmute your phone. This meeting is being recorded. Can we please have roll call?
Councilmember White.
Here.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Here.
Councilmember Kleinfelter.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sim.
Here.
Mayor Ackerland.
Here.
Thank you.
Could everybody please rise for the flag salute?
America. Yes.
Public comment. At a special meeting, citizens wishing to address the City Council may do so at the time the matter on the agenda is discussed, and public comment is, I'm sorry. Let me go back to number 2. Approval of the City Council special meeting agenda of March 29th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Roll call?
Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Sim.
Aye.
Mayor Ackerland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, number 3, public comment. At a special meeting, citizens wishing to address the City Council may do so at the time the matter on the agenda is discussed and public comment is opened. Under provisions of the California Government Code, the City Council is prohibited from materially discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda unless it can be demonstrated to be of an emergency nature or an urgent need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. Presentations, proclamations, appointments, there are none. Number 5, consent calendar items. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second it.
Is there a roll call vote? On consent calendar? Okay, I'm sorry, I'd like to open it before we vote. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar? Any public comment from here? Anybody here?
Excuse me, is there going to be a public comment other than on the consent calendar?
General public comment?
Yes.
Not tonight because this is a special meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comment here at City Hall? Is there any comment from anybody on Zoom regarding the consent calendar?
Not at this time.
Okay, we don't see any hands up. So we had a motion and a second was made. Could we have a roll call vote?
Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Sim.
Aye.
Mayor Ackerland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Public hearings, there are none. Number 7, regular agenda items. 7.1. And before we get into a discussion on that, I am going to recuse myself from this matter because I may have a conflict that involves a real property interest within close proximity to the subject improvements. And
I have the same situation where I have to recuse myself as well
so,
from 7.1.
so Councilmember White has agreed to step in and take it from here. Yeah.
We'll give them a couple seconds to step on out of all right at the moment. Okay, they've stepped out. 7.1 to adopt resolution 2023-15, accepting Zinfandel subdivision unit 1 park lot, a park Vintner Park property by grant deed and improvements. 2, 2023-16, accepting Zinfandel subdivision unit 2 booster pump station lot B property by grant deed and improvements. 3, 2023-17, accepting unit 3 water and sewer system improvements by, I'm sorry, my glass, I'm having a tough time reading it tonight, of course. Irrevocable offer, descendant and other improvements. Sorry about that, guys. And is there a staff report?
The developer has prepared the documents necessary in order to accept the items that you mentioned, and they presented their warranty bond to me this evening before the meeting. We are aware of some minor cracking in the asphalt and a hole. I received pictures of a hole in the asphalt. Public Works is prepared to repair that upon acceptance of the facilities, and the weather allows us to do that. The city engineer is here to answer any questions that you may have. There is a small sinkhole in the park that we're aware of that we are prepared to fix. There was a oak tree removed from the park area due to drought damage. They have mitigated the removal of that tree. We did not recommend a tree be replaced at that location because of the location of that tree, but they have mitigated the tree and replaced it with trees in other locations. And again, the city engineer is here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, first I'm gonna go with council members if they have questions for the city, then I'll go to public comment and then I'll come back around to council members, of course. So Councilmember Kleinfelter, do you have any questions at this time?
Well, I would like to, I don't know how many people you have in the audience from Zinfandel Ridge, and I'd like to hear their concerns. And I also want to make sure that the developer is living up to their side of the development agreement, and no harm financially is the burden of the citizens that aren't a part of that development. So that's all I have for now. And I might, after the public has an opportunity, I will probably comment again. Thank you, Keith.
Of course. And I don't know, we might go through everything and then you might have a whole thing that you want to get into. So,
Yeah, Mike, obviously, I'd like to hear from, our residents that are here. And then just, just the same question is Councilmember Kleinfelter, right? Making sure that the developers met the burden within the development agreement.
Okay, so I'm gonna open it up to public comment. Come on up.
Hi, my name's Marie Froelich, and I'm a Zinfandel Ridge resident. And my concern is, and I think you addressed it a little bit, Margaret, was on the park. Because this has been brought up probably over almost a year ago. You know, the sinkhole was at that time about the size of a quarter. Now you can put a foot into it, and it's a liability issue. And my concern is, if it's fixed after we receive it, who pays for that?
So I can address that question and Valerie's question too on so once tonight, after the council decides to approve this and accepts it, there's a 2-year warranty period, maintenance bond that's in place. The developer puts up that if we need to fix anything, we can use that. If they don't fix it, we can pull their bond to do that. So I think we're covered for a 2-year period. And what we usually do is we set a reminder at the end of that period, and we can go in and look, and if we find anything else, then, they're on the hook to fix it.
Is there a time frame that they have to fix it, or is it up to? Okay, but for us to fix it, because this was brought to the attention several months ago, maybe even a year ago, and it hasn't been fixed to date. So I'm concerned that it is a liability issue. And since Zinfandel Ridge residents HOA hold the liability for these streets and park, we don't want to be in a lawsuit.
Oh, yes. So that the 2-year period would start from the date of acceptance. So tonight, if they accept it, the 2-year clock starts.
Okay,
If
but
that-
then I guess
I'm
we,
not
the
answering.
city, okay,
The city will repair that as soon as we can get into the park.
okay.
That answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Okay, all right, and that's all I have for this one.
Thank you. Is there anyone here at City Hall that would like to speak on this matter? And I am going to ask that you state your name, residence, that whole stuff.
Tim Masters, Harvest Court, Zinfandel Ridge. Just to clarify, are we just talking about the park first, then we'll take each item as it goes, or is this all 3 items? Okay. Under 7.1, gotcha, okay. When I was reading through the documents for acceptance, I was noticing some language that was surprising to me in that in one whereas statement, it says the item is substantially complete. And then later it says, and whereas the city engineer deems the improvement complete. And I'm like, if I were to order a meal and they presented me with something that was substantially complete, I might have a problem with that. It's like if I ordered a burger with guacamole and bacon and it didn't have it, it's substantially complete. It's still a burger, but when does it get really complete is what I'm guessing. Is the city on the hook then to fix it later, or the bond, if you will, to finish the completion?
So I can address, that's a good question. So substantially complete is basically, it's to my satisfaction. It's not deemed totally complete until we finally accept it tonight. So after tonight,
So that's
not
what renders it
substantially
complete. Okay,
Correct.
when you accept it.
Yes.
Okay. So then if there's a defect or some damage that has occurred since construction, the bond covers any repair or necessary improvements for a period of 2 years before.
Correct.
And that is only for items that are needing repair, not for regular maintenance or.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if, I don't know, the water line failed or there was a sinkhole or, it's a defect kind of thing. It's a warranty issue type thing.
Okay, so CFD funds would only be drawn upon for regular maintenance. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, if something is fixing, it's the bond issue. Okay, thank you. Should I come back if there's something else on another item, or get to that now? Okay, all right. Well, that's really pretty much all I was going to ask, other than who is the governing agency that decides whether it's the warranty issue or just maintenance? Is it the city engineer and city manager? Okay, it runs before you, and then you decide whether to send it to the bond. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up. And like I said, remember to state your name and residence.
Here we go. My name is Larry Goltz. I live at Zinfandel Ridge. I live right next to the water pump station, and not a problem or anything. I'm okay with it. But when the city takes over that property, do you have any plans to provide any landscaping around the water pump station? Because it's just weeds now. If there aren't any plans, can you look into it, please?
We don't have any plans to do any landscaping that I'm aware of. We will take care of the weeds, but we don't have any plans that I'm aware of for any landscaping.
Can
We are going to be going out for a request for proposals for landscaping.
Okay.
Once we accept all of this, the landscaping expands for the CFD.
Uh-huh.
And we're going to have to go out for an RFP because those services will expand.
That's what I was looking at, number 7.3, Community Facilities District. Perhaps landscaping can be addressed in that.
Yes,
In that section.
yes.
Okay, as long as I knew you're looking at it, I'm happy.
I'll make a note of that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And can you hit the button again? Sorry about that. Mhm. Okay, is there anyone else here at City Hall that would like to speak on this issue at this time? Going once, going twice. Okay, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak on this issue? Raise your hand using the raise your hand feature.
No one at this time.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to close public comment. And I'm going to go back to council members. Councilmember Kleinfelter, questions, comments, concerns?
Well, I thought that, I'm assuming it's Matt because we were told he was there. I couldn't tell. But I thought that Matt addressed some of the warranty issues, the bonding pretty well. 2 years goes by in the flash. Maybe it's just because I'm old. It seems like it goes by very quickly. And, you know, we all have warranties for this and warranties for that, and everything seems to go bad when the warranty is no longer valid. So have we, and Matt can address this, has a thorough look been made at the current condition of the facilities? And besides the sinkhole, is there anything that would be needing to be addressed immediately? And I also agree about the landscaping, because around the pump area, if it was left out of the development agreement, well, that was, I think, an omission by the city as well. We should be addressing things like that in the development agreements. So I would be in favor of addressing the landscaping issue and adding it to the contract.
So to address your question, Valerie, I'm not aware of anything. We did look at this 3 or 4 months ago when we were slated to take us to the council, and then it kind of got put on hold. So what I typically do is wait to about a month before the 1 year or 2 year mark is up, kind of pencil a reminder on my calendar to go out and take a look and make a list and then try to address it then. But there could be things along the way too that, you know, pop up, but definitely I will have it on my radar to make sure it doesn't get lapsed to look at.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, Councilmember McLaughlin, comments, concerns, questions?
No, I think, thank you, Matt. And thank you for the questions brought up to clarify, because I believe you answered all the questions I had. Thank you.
The only question that I kind of really have is that 2 year warranty on the bond. Is that kind of a standard Not that we have a lot of development going on in the city of Plymouth, but
Yeah, it's standard for like a public works project. If we were to do a project street, it's a 1 year, usually 1 year. So I think it could be, the city or agency could ask for whatever you wanted. I'm not sure how the 2 year got in there. Yeah, spelled it out, yeah.
okay. What's the wishes of the council?
So I think we'll do this in 3 separate motions, correct? One for each, or we can do it.
The motion could be to adopt this.
Well, I like, yep. Nope, I'm great with that. So I'll make a motion to adopt the resolutions as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter,
Aye.
and Vice Mayor Sim and Mayor Ackerland have recused themselves.
Okay, we're still moving on. Oh, you're texting right now? Doug's phone's right there. It's getting text. Okay, we're gonna take just a real quick little break, I guess.
Okay, item 7.2, receive informational report on the drainage issues at Zinfandel Ridge. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, the city council has had and heard multiple complaints on the drainage issues at Zinfandel Ridge. The city council has heard multiple complaints on the drainage issues at Zinfandel Ridge, and the city engineer is present to explain what the city's responsibility is in terms of the drainage as it occurs to development projects. And the developer's engineer, REY Engineering, is also present, as well as Stefan with Reader Sutherland. He's on Zoom. And Reed with Tim Lewis Communities is in the audience. So all parties in relationship to Zinfandel Ridge are present so that we can address this problem all at once.
I was going to say, can I ask you to lead this part of the
Sure,
discussion? Thank
Of
you.
course. So I'll just add, and then we kind of open it up. You guys might have some questions, but basically how it works, if there's a new development project that is presented or proposed, it goes through the planning commission, eventually through the city council. For this project, there was kind of a vision and how the development was going to look, and it was kind of a rural feel. It didn't want curb and gutter, and that how many years ago was that, Jim? 15 years ago, came through before my time. And so that was kind of what was voted on and approved. So fast forwarding 15 years from now, we have had this year a lot of rain. And typically how it works, depending on the agency, you look at the 100-year storm event. So that's what we require. Part of the improvement standards is you design your development project for the 100-year storm, which is basically a 1% statistical 1% chance for a large storm. What you do is you look at your pre-developed flow. So you look at, before you develop the site, how is the drainage working? You know, where's water going, different sheds, and you kind of break it out and you look at, quantify the amount of water, cubic feet per second, basically. And based on the rainfall intensity and the time of concentration, it's kind of technical, but there's mathematical equations kind of calculate this. So you look at your pre-developed flow, and then once you decide how you're going to develop the project, based on your grading and drainage is kind of very, very important for a project. But once you lay out the grading and figure out your drainage, you have to compare that to your pre-developed flow. So if you have a certain area that's getting 10 cubic feet per second of water in a certain shed, and then you develop it and it's 20, you got to take the increase in flow and you got to mitigate it. Basically, you got to put it in a basin or something else, underground drainage or something to that effect. So you can't increase it. So for Zinfandel Ridge, we looked at that, and the developer did everything. I mean, the developer's engineer did, a normal drainage study, calculates everything, was very well done. So nothing was really, I think what we're seeing and people are experiencing is the large storm event we had in January, and it was most likely exceeded the 100-year storm. So there's no way to really plan for that and design for that. It's not required. So that's kind of where we're at. Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Oh, true. I missed a couple of things. So one thing that was brought up over the last 6-8 months, we were experiencing, there was some ditches in backyards or some drainage easements that were altered, basically. So landscaping came in, people changed things, culverts were blocked up, big rocks were placed. And that once that happens, it's as you all might know, it causes problems. So we can't have people changing things that were designed to carry a certain capacity of water. Once you alter that, it kind of screws things up. Also, with each phase 1 through 3 on the final maps, drainage easements were placed in according set locations, basically, to take water through different areas of the development to get it around certain things. So that was all in place and on all the final maps. Okay, Jim. You could probably add a little more. He's more drainage savvy than I am.
Jim Fisher with REY Engineers. Just to tack on what Matt said, I think what the project was entitled 2010, somewhere around there. The intent was to not necessarily take what you see up in El Dorado Hills or downtown Sacramento. It was to try to develop something out here in Plymouth that kind of met the rural look and feel. And so that was kind of using the entitlements, the design guidelines. That was kind of what we carried forward into the final design of the subdivision. So as Matt mentioned, the detention basin you see there by the park, that was meant to mitigate the post-development flows so that when it leaves the subdivision, it matches pre-development. We also did that at a lot of the boundary conditions. So we looked at that even in those like down lots of Harvest Court and other areas that didn't necessarily flow into the basin. We also worked in those locations to try to cut off flow and route it into the pond and then make sure those edge conditions also met. I think a lot of what we've seen lately is some concerns with, on-lot drainage, what we've tried to do throughout the process. So we kind of have grading plans, we have improvement plans, and then we also have plot plans that we develop at the home building stage. So throughout the process, we add in different drainage facilities. So there's certain drainage facilities you'll see in the grading and improvement plans. A lot of those, when you concentrated flow and brought them across other lots, you see those in drainage easements. And then you'll see some situations where we didn't necessarily have drainage easements in the lots down below, but when, before coming here, I tried to brush up a little bit on some of the case law when it comes to, drainage law. I'm sure Frank, you could maybe provide a little bit of background there, but, essentially lots that are downhill, have to kind of accept and convey drainage that comes onto their property. The uphill lot, is not supposed to alter or concentrate flow in locations that weren't concentrated prior. So when it came to the plot plan stage, we worked with the city to kind of develop some, we call them like dissipation systems. So anytime where we had downspouts that, concentrated water out of a pipe, then we put like a dissipation blanket or dissipation trench or something to try to convert it back into sheet flow. And then that downhill lot, that plot plan was developed with drainage facilities that would take that drainage coming onto them and then around down into a drainage facility. So, we've kind of the intent of it is through those layers of drainage improvements, try to pass over, lots that have, safe ways to convey the drainage. I realize as time goes on, people want to landscape their yard and things change. And that's kind of a little bit outside of our hands at that point. But, our goal is to try to, at that point in time, when we hand over a developed lot to a home buyer, that at that point in time, there are facilities to do that. Matt had mentioned there are ditches. There are homes that were built in phase one that had drainage easements in them with the intent that future phases were going to drain into them. And those easements are there to allow the future development to then drain into those locations. And, those ditches were sized, with that thought in mind. So when they were built in phase one, the thought is they would then have the sufficient capacity to convey flows later on. One thing about phase one, two, or the different phases, and in many cases, portions of the subdivision were built with no development uphill of them. So they actually had a far greater area draining into their lot. And then as the development occurred, as Zinfandel Parkway was expanded, as Sommelier was built, those actually kind of fragmented and cut off some of the shed. Granted, when you build homes, when you build streets, that does increase the amount of runoff in those locations, but as far as the area flowing in. And so that all kind of goes into I like to refer to as voodoo magic, the drainage calculations, when we try to, come up with what that runoff will be. And then we size the facilities as best we can to convey it. And then because we know it's not an exact, or shall I say imperfect science, there are freeboard requirements. So in cases we put in a V ditch, and then we say you have to have a half a foot of freeboard, or I think the city standard, depending on the lining, it's either 1.5 feet or a half a foot at the different storm events. And so if you consider, a V ditch, the bottom of it has a very small cross-sectional area. So as you look at that half a foot of freeboard, it's actually in effect in many cases like an additional 50% or 2-time capacity, because you're draining that bottom triangle, and then now you have this large trapezoid at the top that is your freeboard. What we saw in a couple of situations is that ditch was then lined with rock. So rather than being a foot deep, ended up being a half a foot deep. That's where some of the issues we're kind of seeing. Luckily, I think as far as I'm aware of, none of them have necessarily overtopped and gone into structures as far as I'm aware. But that's something to consider moving forward. It's kind of something on the homeowner side that we really need to keep those ditches as originally designed. But happy to answer any additional questions the council or public have. And so thank you very much.
Do we want to hear from Reed? Anything? Okay. Any council discussion now, or do we want to open it to public comment first?
I'd like to open it up to public comment, and then I'm sure we'll have a whole slew of questions.
Yeah. So we'll open it to public comment now. So is there anybody here at City Hall who would like to come up? Yes, please come up, and if you could tell us your name.
I'm Nancy Frary. I'm lot 53. I moved in over 5 years ago, phase one. My problem now is I have 2 easements on my lot. I was very much aware of them when I purchased the property. I have not altered them in any way except adding rock, lining rock in them. They're now wanting to drain 5 of the new lots into my drainage ditch through my yard. And the drainage ditch is not adequate. Their engineering that was done way, way, way long ago, I don't think they took into account phase 3, or I don't know what they did, but They put a drainage ditch in my yard. They want to now drain 5 home sites through my yard, and the drainage ditch is not adequate. And it is supposedly has to be lowered 32 inches, which means it has to be much wider. I know I have an easement, and I know if I planted landscaping, that's my problem, but I do have landscaping, and it's been there for almost 5 years, and I have a large tree there, and they're going to have to tear down part of my fence, come in with a tractor. There's not much space between the ditch and the back fence. I'm not happy about that. I mean, I have been communicating with the engineers, and they're telling me I signed off on all this stuff, and I don't believe I have. And yes, the documents that we signed when we purchased our lots had blanket CYAs. They didn't specifically say you're going to have 5 lots draining through your yard. They didn't specifically say they were going to raise the height of the land in back of me where they built houses by 6 feet. They didn't specifically say that I wasn't going to have enough water pressure at my house because my meter's at the bottom of my street and my driveway goes up 13 feet and I don't have the proper water pressure. Those are 2 issues I just wanted to mention, but I won't talk about them because that's not what I'm here for. But they're also going to affect your lot, Kevin, because they're going to be draining some lots through your yard into your drainage ditch. So why are we having to, when we were not notified that this could happen, the ditch that they put in my yard is not adequate. So did they really know they were going to drain 5 lots through my yard? And why are us existing homeowners having to have this hassle and having my fence torn down and a tractor in my yard for who knows how long, tearing up my landscaping when they should have known about this, or they should have informed us of this. And I still don't feel I signed one of the documents that Matt had given me when he came out to the yard. He's an engineer. I would like to see a copy of it with my signature or my initials, because I don't think I was informed. I know I was informed about the easements, but I was not informed that they could do whatever they wanted with my easement and drain 5 new lots. And how many more lots are going to drain through there? So I'm not happy about that at all. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there others who, yes, please come on up. And just please let us know your name and where you reside.
Again, my name is Larry Goltz, Goltz. I live at 8821 Sommelier Drive. My house is right next to the water pump station. And if you ever go up to Zinfandel, you will see the house with 20 sandbags in front of it. That's my house. The street is designed in such a way that the water sheets off of the asphalt street, comes right into my yard. And it, by the way, it did flood into my garage. I had to put a water, like a little plastic dam, and seal it with caulking. It's about a ½ an inch high, just to keep the water out of my garage. A great deal of water comes into my garage. I don't like the sandbags in front of my house. I have a plan that I will do myself. I'm going to put in a little brick barrier back off of the sidewalk, just enough to direct the water away from my lot and back towards the street. But I have a fear that at least on the Harvest Court side of my lot, if I keep the water from coming into my yard, it's going to go into somebody else's yard. And I'm a little concerned about that. I might have some responsibility for water going into my neighbor's yard. It does come into my yard now into the back. It flows through the hillside, and I put a drain in that drains it essentially out to the pond. It goes over by the little water pump station, and they have a rock drainage ditch there, and I run it into that drainage ditch. So it's not a problem in the sense of my backyard, because I have a drain pipe in there. But if I drain the water from the street, if I divert it to keep it on the street, it's going to go down Harvest Court and go into somebody else's yard. I haven't discussed that with my neighbors at all. And I'm not doing anything until I do discuss it with my neighbors, but I would like the developer and perhaps the city to look at it and give me some advice. I've said it before, I'm not asking for somebody else to solve my problems. I'll fix my own problems. But I do need some guidance from somebody who knows a lot more about water than I do. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Do we have more public comment?
Jim Masters, Harvard's Court. So we're all pretty well familiar with the phrase, it looked good on paper. So my car required a recall because of a hood latch. I'm sure that the latch design looked good on paper. The engineers did a great job designing the car. They put it together and assembled it well. But in practice and time and experience, somebody's hood flew up in front of the face of the driver. And so they put out a safety recall. And all of us were notified, and the consumers had it repaired free of charge. So when I look at the drainage at Zinfandel Ridge, you look good on paper. That's not a dispute. You did the right calculations. You had the right slope formula in your drain off calculations. You looked at it and it still looked like what you had hoped it would look like. But those of us who live on Harvest Court in particular, and my neighbor, Mr. Goltz, has mentioned how the water comes past his property onto our street, are experiencing less than optimum. You know, you can talk about a 100-year flood, but every year that we've been there, the water comes into our yard. Now, I know there must have been something wrong with the original drain plan, because after we signed our sales contract, you installed a swale in front of our yard and also in front of our neighbor's yard. I don't think the swale is all that effective. In fact, when the developer came out to look at our property, he said, well, maybe try getting out the debris from the swale. And so we did that, but we've had rain since then. We even at our own expense put in a French drain in front of our house just to keep water out of our crawl space. We had puddles of water. It looked like a lake the first year we moved in. And in terms of mitigating the water around our property, we were having severe erosion on one side of our house. The builder came in and threw some riprap down there, but it didn't look like it was planned. It came down the driveway and it was eroding our side yard. And our neighbors the same. So, you know, we're not pointing fingers at the engineers or the city. We're pointing fingers at the water and saying, look at that. It's coming into our crawl space. It's eroding our lawn. It's killing our trees because of the water that puddles in our front yard. We're just saying that, you know, I don't know. You said there were staff visits. I never had the engineer come talk to me. I mean, maybe you've got other things to deal with, but as far as I know, nobody on Harvest Court has had an engineer look at their property. So it looks good on paper, but not everything performs as well as designed. That happens in cars, airplanes, whatever. So I'm just saying, you know, you can design it with the improvement standards that are published. I mean, we were mentioning section 11 of the Plymouth improvement standards, and it said, street improvement shall include, usually the word shall means mandatory, adequate provisions for storm drainage. Adequate shall consist of a system of underground piping, generating self-scouring velocities and leading to a disposal point, which is workable under conditions of heavy rainfall and runoff. I can drive around Zinfandel Ridge and see a lot of these, like large, you know, riprap, you know, filled open ditches and big collection points. Can you tell me if where those exist on Harvest Court? There isn't anything like that. So I'm just saying, you know, maybe on paper it looked okay without those things, but I'm looking at this saying, like, couldn't we have some of those? I think just some curbing along the road to direct the water down the road to a point of exit would be beneficial, rather than letting it flow, cheating into everybody's property and driveway and causing some issues. So that would be my request, that the city just send the engineer out to evaluate on a night like tonight. Would be a great time to see what happens. I've got videos, I can send you some, but I'm just saying that we really need to have someone look at it and just say, like, because we get this kind of rain a lot ever since we moved in. And in fact, the rain in 2008 was very strong too. So you probably saw it during your design phase. I'm just saying that when you inspect a property for drainage, come out on a rainy day. That would be a good idea. So thank you for listening.
Thank
I
you.
have one question for you.
course.
You mentioned every year.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I have
That's
videos
all
of
my-
every year.
That's the only question
Yeah,
I have. Thank you.
My husband does a great job, but he just left off a few things, and so I'm just going to fill in. So I'm Marie Froelich, and Jim Masters is my husband. We moved in 3 years ago, and when we moved in, happened to be 2019, 2021, according to the weather, Plymouth had the most rainfall, even as of March 23rd, 2023. Although after today, I don't know if that's still the case. But my point was the rain and the erosion in our yard was so bad that we spent over 50,000 installing French drains along both sides in our back to just keep our air conditioners from floating away. They were underwater. We also had our garbage cans floating down to the bottom of the hill. So they put in a swale, and it was a swale they installed. We reworked that and we added other French drains. We've done everything that the builder suggested to mitigate it. All 3 years we've had water in our crawl space, and we still do. Actually, the water has drained off. Now we have mushrooms, but this is not acceptable. And, you know, we sent a letter, we sent videos. Nobody has come out and looked at our street, to my knowledge. Although the report said that they came out and talked to neighbors and spent thousands of dollars, but I've just asked that somebody come out and look at the water flow on Harvest Court.
Okay, now got another question that's going to seem irrelevant. Quite a few homes out there have crawl spaces. Are they,
I
most
think
of them
there's
are slab?
5 or 6, but we're at the low end. So
Okay.
the water runs, we have a large front yard and it runs down the front of the yard. And, you know, we have worked with the developer. Stefan has been out a couple of times, but he's, and I can't speak for Stefan, I know he's on the call, but he doesn't want to change what might affect Tim Lewis. And this, you know, his thing is the city signed off on it. So he said, you know, go back to the city, and the city said, well, it's not our problem. You know, it will go back to the developer, and we just want the water away from our house. That's all we're asking. And, you know, maybe we can all work together to see that happen. Thank you.
Is there anybody else here at City Hall who would like to? Yes, please come on up. And we just ask if you can give us your name and where you live.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yale. I live in Zinfandel Ridge on Vintner Court. So I know that you all have mentioned that the look of the whole Zinfandel Ridge was to have it natural. So in our court, we've noticed that there is not much that was designed to pull water from the street as drainage. So if you look down in Harvest Court or these other courts, there's sewers, there's manholes, there's sorry, the one under us, right before us. Oh, Riesling, sorry. So in Riesling, that's one court right in front of us. They have a lot of drainage that comes from the street and pulls away. There's ditches, there's sewers, and they go out into the reservoir. But in our court, we don't have anything but I believe my 4-inch pipe that goes right next to my driveway. And I think Dave also has a little bit of front drainage in front of his house to pull all that water from the street, away from the street, but it goes through our houses. But all that water has to go through our houses and go right back into our swale. And our swales are the primary location to get that into the reservoir. So now that, to bring up the last big storm, not to call on Tim Lewis of not predicting future releases of this whole development, our neighbors, they had too much water coming into their property. So Tim Lewis's solution was to come back on our property and make an alternative drain. So they had the soil and they forked it off to try to mitigate water going into their yard, but it was a worse solution than it was originally. And right now they're still trying to fix that issue. So their second attempt in trying to fix this, because I don't believe this was on paper, as everyone says, it looks great. But to put it into action, they actually came back on our property last week to try to address the same issue by adding another swale along our fence line that we share. But that the measurements that they pulled out, it wouldn't have worked. So even today, they are still searching for solutions on how to make the drainage work from our court down to the reservoir. So, and a question with the city on making the whole, I guess, development look natural. Was there like a explanation on why there's basically 2 exit points of our court of water from the street that it comes out to?
I don't have an answer to that, sorry.
Okay, cool. Because, and another note, we just take water. We are not the highest point in our court either. We have multiple houses on top, and we have 3 more houses behind us that are also going to have water come into our old drainage. So it's already overwhelmed today. So with all that and adding more drainage into our system, it's going to overwhelm our system even more. So I just wanted to add that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here in City Hall who would like to?
Leonard Burns, I'm on Landrum Street. I just had one clarifying question for Matt. It was in regard to the 100-year storm calculation. And you were saying that we've exceeded that. Do you have that data saying that the rainfall for any particular time frame has exceeded the 100-year?
Good question, Leonard. I do not. I'm just making an assumption, but
Okay.
I don't, Jim, do you know who actually calculates that? I know that the calculations are done through is it the state?
Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I was just
Yeah.
saying that you threw that out there, and I'm not to undermine the statement, but I'm just saying that we could avoid a lot of conversation here tonight if you could just prove that there's the
Yeah.
rainfall in a time frame, whether it's annual,
point.
monthly, weekly, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. All right, thanks.
Anybody else here in City Hall who'd like to make public comment on this? Okay, so. Okay. Okay. Is there anybody on Zoom who has any public comment on this agenda item? And I can't see if hands are up.
No hands are up at this time.
Yeah, hi. This is Stefan. Hang on a second. Yeah, Stefan Horstrer. Good evening, Ms. Mayor, honorable council members, staff. I would have liked to be there tonight, show my face, but I'm down with COVID, unfortunately. So I apologize for not being there. Didn't want to get anybody. I'm doing fine. Wanted to, voice our concerns, my concerns that I hear the homeowners, and I have been actively working with some of them on these issues. I've been involved, I've been out. There's certainly some items that we feel we can help with, we can address. There's others we, feel are certainly at this time the responsibility of the homeowners. But we're here, we're there to as a resource, and we are actively working through some of these issues. And I believe we want to stand behind the development that we think is overall very attractive still. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on Zoom who would like to make public comment? Okay, there is nobody else on Zoom, so I'm going to close this now to public comment. And thank you, everybody. And now I'll open it up for council and staff discussion. Anything?
Yes, I also live on Harvest Court. And I'm equally perplexed as to why there wasn't any catch basins put on Harvest Court. And also the curb that would direct the water very nicely on Harvest Court is on the high side of the court, which does zero for the water flow. If that curb was on the lower side, we could direct that water behind into a swale or into a catch basin or something. I've been able to deal with it on my house because I'm able to. I put some ditches around my house, and and I'm able to direct the water behind my house. I'm a single-story house on a slab, so I don't have crawl spaces and so forth to deal with, as a couple of people have mentioned this evening. But it's interesting that this particular circle doesn't have the same elements that some of the other areas have with the ditches that are rocked and so forth, and catch basins with these steel grates inside them that are taking care of the situations. There seems to be kind of an odd way that these various streets have been dealt with, and with, like I say, ditches on one street but not the other, catch basins on one street, not the other. Why put a curb to direct water on the high side of the street, which makes no sense? But each person that's talked tonight has had a little different problem. Again, I've been able to deal with my problem, but I can understand the person that got up that has 5 houses behind them draining into their ditch right by their house. That doesn't sound right to me. That could not have been looked at 2 years ago, thinking, well, okay, you bought your house. There's the ditch we're going to put by your house. Oh, by the way, there's going to be 5 houses behind it. They're all going to drain in the same ditch. Doesn't sound right to me. But anyway.
Okay, Doug,
Go ahead,
I got a few answers for some of your questions. So as far as why there's no DIs, call them catch basins or inlets on that, I don't know that. I didn't design it, but Jim might be able to elaborate on that. But as far as the curb on the high side, I think why it was put there is from erosion standpoint. If you don't put it, you're going to have dirt and stuff coming down the hill. It's kind of as a barrier. On the low side, the problem with curb and gutter, and again back to the beginning, is there wasn't the feel and look of the development. That wasn't the intent. But if you do put curb and gutter, the problem with that is you have to have a curb cut at your driveways. So you're really concentrating all the water, and it's going to jump the curb anyway, go down your driveway, where at least without a curb, you have a chance the water can sheet flow and you're not really concentrating to one direct area. So on the 5 lots on Nancy's, so I believe, and Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong here too, but I believe when that was originally designed, that there was more water coming there than after, like Jim mentioned earlier. So the 5 lots, I believe, and I have to go back and look at the calcs I don't have with me, but I think that it's less drainage than was initially designed for. So the 5 lots is not increasing what was originally intended to go through that ditch.
So public comment is now closed.
And I also, I don't have the map with me, I should have brought it, but the final map does state for Nancy's lot that there's drainage from, it specifies which lots can drain through there. It's really clear. There's a note on the map that clarifies all that. The drainage from, I think it even is broad enough to say that all flow from the future phases can drain through there. It's pretty clear statement.
Okay, my questions are in kind of different direction and why I was asking the questions during public comment. When we do one of these studies for water drainage, does soil type go into that? I gotta imagine it does. And the reason I asked that is because of the crawl space thing. I can remember the last time we had a significant amount of rain, whatever, 14 years ago or whatever. I was looking at homes to buy in the area. And of course, I was doing inspections on those homes in the area. And I don't think I was able to crawl one of them because of the soil type. Matter of fact, I can say that there's a house over by Pokerville Market that I'm sure has a pool underneath its house right now. They'll get 2 to 3 feet of soil. And I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm just saying that's what's going on with with the soil. I see that commonly, especially this time of year. I haven't been able to inspect a house in, I'd say, 3 months right now, just because it's a common thing. That doesn't make it excusable or whatever. That's why I asked the question about the soil. The thing about the drainage and why I asked the year is we didn't get too much water last year. We didn't get, so that's a real concern of mine. If we didn't get the water, then it wasn't designed to no 100-year storms. It was designed to a 1-year storm. It sounds like it might, but this is also, I don't know how to explain it. This is theory. I don't want to call it guess and check. This is theory that we're trying to use to develop these areas. Just as exactly as you guys said, though, when you have a recall on a vehicle, they use theory to build that vehicle. And then they go, okay, that idea didn't work. We need to fix it. So it's not that I'm anti one way or another. It's just the kind of the way I feel about it. That's all I had to say.
Councilmember McLaughlin, any comments, thoughts, questions?
Just a couple. Obviously it's, hearing the presentation tonight and the questions, concerns raised are obviously of concern, right? And, what I like seeing though, is that all parties are at the table. So there's, it's not somebody conveniently absent this evening, which, I greatly appreciate. I think it sounds like there's some work being done to try to address it. I think there was an excellent question brought up is our precipitation during a certain window exceeded the 100-year flood piece, which would make this year technically an outlier. But then, as Councilmember White pointed out, that you brought up that in years of drought, you still had some issues. And so the bigger question that comes in is are all of the homes that are truly impacted, are you represented here tonight? Or are there other, my assumption is, right, it's 10%. But, I'm sure there's some that don't have any issues whatsoever. And then there's others such as yourselves. I think it'd just be a matter of getting our arms around what it is. It sounds, from Stefan speaking, and there's a desire to work it through, maybe even, in the case of, instead of making a 30-inch swale, is putting in an underground pipe with a basin that could do it to where she can at least, plant a garden over it. Or I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not going to delve into the weeds. That was pretty close to the weeds. So, but I guess where I'm, hopefully optimistic and remain, positive with this is that all parties are at least here represented, having a conversation. But I think we certainly need to make sure this stays on our radar. As a city, we need to be a part of, at least since we're signatory to it, I would assume that, are approving the plans. We may not have the direct liability, but I think we'd be somewhat of a, facilitator in helping to resolve this.
Hold on, if you don't mind. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'd like to, Councilmember Kleinfelder, can I get to you in a minute?
Of course.
Okay. Did you have something you wanted to
I just
respond?
want to chime in as to something that Councilman Rothman said. I think that there were phase 1 and phase 2 are pretty well represented here, to my knowledge. Phase 3, I don't think they are. I think they're very new to this whole situation. And I got a hunch that they're having problems as well, but they're not here to talk about it. They're just moving in. But I think from my perspective, phase 1 and phase 2, probably 6-7 houses are having issues beyond normal. That's That makes sense.
Councilmember Kleinfelter, would you like?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was on the agenda as informative, so we're not solving all the problems of the world on this issue tonight. I think the information is invaluable, and I think it's worthy of future discussions. It might even be worthy of, a council member liaison or 2 council member liaison working with them to address in writing all of the concerns at once, or doing a survey so that you get the information across the board, not just the citizens that came out tonight. I am concerned about, and Matt can address this because we've had this issue before in other areas of the city, is that things are designed in a certain way, and then if there are alterations, then it throws everything off. And in this case, it looks like it's a combination of both, that it's not working as it was designed to. And it's also had areas that have been altered. The other issue is, I think it gets murky, and this is worthy of another agenda item in the future, of whose responsibility is each part. What's the city's responsibility? What's the developer's responsibility? What's the HOA's responsibility? So all of us take our responsibilities seriously, and no one gets caught up in the, no, it's he said, she said, it's their problem, not mine kind of situation. That's not going to do any good for anyone. And everyone there just wants some kind of a resolution and to be listened to. So I'm really glad it was on here for information. I hope we can address it deeper on another agenda.
I agree. Well, I agree with, and have listened and to what everybody has had to say, and it's informative, and this isn't an area where I claim to have any expertise. And I also think that, yes, there's the city engineering and developers, and then just to maybe complicate things a little bit, we're talking about 2 developers. But Councilmember Kleinfelter pointed out, we're not being asked to take any action. This is information only. And unless anybody from the city or the council has anything that they'd like to add, would you like to add something? Yes.
Yes, please.
Of course.
I just want to read a section of the documents that the residents in phase 1 and 2 get with their closing documents for the council. And there's a section in the documents, and it's labeled drainage. And it reads that the buyer must not change or interfere with the established grade and drainage patterns on buyer's lot without the prior approval by the city, to the extent required by the applicable municipal ordinances and required as specified in the CCNRs. Any interference, and that is in all capitals, with the drainage patterns as initially constructed can cause water to become trapped under the structure, which could impact structural integrity and warranties, both expressed and implied. So it puts an onus on the home buyer to be careful what they are changing in terms of the landscaping, because it does change the drainage, and it can cause some of the problems that we're hearing about. It's not causing all of the problems that we're hearing about, but it can cause some of the problems that we're hearing about. We are referring people back to the developers because the city feels that the drainage problems are between the developer and the residents. The developer's engineers are trying to work with the residents and going between the developers and the developer's engineers. They are working to try to mitigate the problems. We are trying to stay in the loop with the work that's being done. Matt and Jim Fisher with REY engineers stay in contact with one another in terms of the work that's being done out there. So we're all trying to stay in touch with one another to stay involved with what's going on. Phase 3 is not complete. We don't know what other things will come about once that entire phase is complete. Some of the drainage issues could be mitigated once that entire phase is finished. We will continue to monitor what's happening, and we will try to get with the residents that we've heard from tonight in terms of working with REY engineering to see what we can do with the issues that we've heard.
Thank you. Please, Matt, go ahead.
I just want to add one last thing, and Nancy, I don't want you to think we're blowing this off. Jim submitted a calculation to me and I haven't reviewed it yet, but I'm going to work with you closely and we're not gonna, we're not gonna impact you. That's not the intent, we're gonna make this right and we're gonna work this out. So I don't want you to feel like I'm just blowing you out. Thank you.
Any other comments? So, Councilmember Kleinfelder, anything else?
No, it was informative. I'm sure it's an ongoing discussion.
And so I think is it fair of me to say that by consensus, the council is accepting that we're acknowledging the report and the update on this as information? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. And item 7.3 is to receive informational report on the Community Facilities District number 2016-01 funds. And if we could have a staff report.
This report has been a long time coming since my arrival, actually. The supplemental information for the original packet was included in the special meeting packet. The expenditures for the O&M account amount was $135,463.88, leaving a balance in that account of just over $90,000. And the expenditures for public safety have been zero, leaving $196,803.81. The public safety account does allow us to do some maintenance, like to use some of that funds to supplement general fund monies to do some repairs at the fire station. The O&M, we're leaving some of the money in there for street repairs to the city streets that we have in case we need a slurry seal or some pothole damage, and then regular maintenance that we may have in that area. Total collected to this date from levies is $4,023, $168.76. I can answer any questions that you have. I provided all of the ledgers showing all of the expenses to date and revenues collected, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. And thank you so much for all the work that you put into this. I know it was a lot of work. So thank you for cleaning this up. and making this understandable. Council comments, questions? Let's start with Councilmember Kleinfelter because she waited so patiently. Agenda item.
I'm good. I think it's good to get the report. I as well thank Margaret for putting it together. I think it's time to establish a plan or in our budget, address it in the budget and how the council would like some of those funds used each year, what maintenance to use them on, what public safety equipment, the repairs at the fire station, or if they need any new things there. So it's good to identify the amounts, but it's also going to require us to have a plan of what to do with them.
I absolutely agree. Any other comments from the council, from council members?
Margaret, I'm just kind of curious, what percentage of these numbers can be held specifically for work done at Zinfandel Ridge? For example, I see that the public safeties can be used partially for the fire station, for example, right? Would that be monies that would be shared with the general fund, or how does that work in terms of where that money's spent? Because it was my understanding it would all be spent specifically at in Zinfandel Ridge. Not so?
No, it can be used for the fire station as a because the fire station services Zinfandel Ridge. There's no specific percentage.
Okay.
It's not spelled out. Other things that it can be used for are the contract for fire services. I have an upcoming meeting with the new fire chief and the Mr. Chu.
Okay.
And I expect we could possibly be getting an increase in our contract. I'm hoping not, but there's no percentage there.
Okay.
I just want to chime in just for the record here. The contract we have with AFPD is valid through 2030. So I know that's off subject, but just for clarification.
Correct.
I was with the mayor a few months ago and we did a little research on the work that is going to be needed at the fire station. It's rather extensive. A lot of it's been deferred, and that's, at some point we're going to have a serious look at that. And
We had an engineer, a structural engineer go through, and we are waiting for his report to come back. Once that comes back, I'll bring a report to the council and let the council know what exactly everything that needs to be done at the fire station.
That would be great.
I have one more question. I see a lot of checks written to Simmons Landscaping. Are they doing anything beyond just the portion between Highway 24 and Port Drive? Is that the only portion of Zinfandel Ridge they're working on? Or are they doing things beyond that?
They have one other section that they're doing, but it's not much.
Okay. I'm sure Chad Simmons won't be very happy with my next comment, but I think $1,600 a month to do what he's doing on that little short section of road is pretty not very good, but that's my own personal opinion. But
Like I stated last meeting, we'll be going out for an RFP for maintenance to include the items that we accepted this meeting. And we'll see, and it'll be a much more defined scope of service.
Thank you.
I didn't really have the time to delve completely into this, but I noticed a couple of expenses that I wondered about, and I think it might just be a better idea for me to email you, but for example, I don't know if it was tree trimming or the removal of a tree. I don't remember. It was like $2,500 or something. So I kind of wondered what that was about, because I know a tree was removed from the park. And so I didn't know if it was that, and if it, okay. So you could just fill me in later or now if you want.
I have an answer for that.
Okay.
We did not remove the tree from the park. That was paid by the developer.
Okay,
The 2,500 that was for 10 days of tree trimming along what we were paying for
okay.
and shrub cleanup. And that's what that expense was for.
Okay, thank you. And while I'm at it, looking at the water, it's pretty consistent. And I'm looking at 2019, for example, it's pretty consistent that month after month after month, it's like about $400 to $500 in the and that was like during the summer. And then in the fall, it starts to drop down to approximately 150 and then 103. And then all of a sudden, and I've seen this in a few areas, for 1 month, it spikes up to over $2,400 for water. And it just says water utility billing.
I think
And-
fire hydrant,
Fire hydrant?
maybe talk about it. Perhaps, somebody tapped in the fire hydrant, is it?
Yeah,
Is
the
that-
hydrants aren't metered, so there we go. Yeah.
Anyway. And I meant to highlight everything and be specific, but tonight, again, we're accepting this report. And I think if we find any errors or something that maybe need to come out of a different budget, we can address that at a later time, right? But you got the gist of the whole thing, which again.
Yes,
is
and
very
these
much
numbers were audited and the auditor didn't find any abnormalities with the numbers that were pulled. And I went over all of this with our finance director and she didn't see anything abnormal with any of the numbers as well. So she and I discussed this a couple of times between the time I put the report together and the time that it got published. So we talked about these numbers substantially. We did find 2 charges from MBS that were charged to the facility district that didn't belong to the facility district that we took out and charged back to the general fund.
Yeah. So does anybody have any idea why that water charge would have spiked up to over $2,400? Because that just, I know if my water bill went up that high, I'd be wondering, and I don't expect anybody to answer that now, unless somebody off the top of their head knows the answer to that. Otherwise, I think this is just something we can explore later.
It probably needs to be explored, Mayor, but usually, just talking from experience here, usually when something spikes as much as that, there has been a leak somewhere. So just throwing it out there, I don't know. We have, Matt might know.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a good question.
Yeah. And I I don't think we have to answer that question tonight. I don't feel like we need to. Yeah, but I think Doug just mentioned it was 4 years ago, but I think I saw some similar expenses. Any other, Keith, anything you want to add or comment on? Councilmember McLaughlin?
Yeah, I just thank you for pulling this all together, right? I know you've been working diligently on this since the beginning, and our residents from Zinfandel Ridge have been asking. I know council members have been asking. It's been a question that's raised that, you know, shall we say BM, right, before Mike being on the council. This has been something in the works for some time, and so just truly thank you for pulling this together. I think, you know, the questions Marianne asked are excellent as we just continue to refine. I love the fact it's going to be itemized out in future budgets to hopefully prevent history from repeating itself. So thank you so very much.
Moving forward, this will have its own budget line in the budget. So it will be pulled out and you'll see it. It won't be included just in the general fund.
Yeah, that would be great. I would like to open it to public comment now. Is there anybody here at City Hall who would like to speak on this? And I saw some head nodding that maybe somebody has an explanation for why that water bill jumped up so high. Leonard, do you have any thoughts?
Jim Masters, Harris Court. Yeah, as a matter of fact, a couple times out on walks, I saw Amador Water had the fire hydrants running for long periods of time. I'm not sure why. It may have been part of the construction cost. You know, they have to test all the water hydrants. I don't know. That's just a guess, but yeah. I saw it flowing down Vintner, from Vintner Court, and another time on Zinfandel Ridge Parkway. So just saying, if they needed to run the water that long, perhaps it's the developer's choice to do that. I don't know. And should we be paying for that? I don't know.
The hydrants aren't metered. They're not included in the
they
bills.
wouldn't have been.
No.
Okay, so that doesn't explain it then. Okay. But I did see some water going down the parkway, like wetness on dry days. So might have been a leak or it's one of those valves on the sprinklers, maybe. At any rate, thank you for doing what you did on the research for this ZR CFD. I also did ask the county auditor for figures on how much did we collect and all this other stuff. And I did a comparison on what the auditor gave me and what was being put into these NBS reports, and also the staff report, the one that you published last week. It's different than what you said this week. So I don't know what changed, but on the one that was supposed to be presented last Thursday, there was a little summary and the figures are different today. Maybe you just found some errors that you had to fix, but anyway, there's just a little difference. Most of the first years were identical, but then when we got into from 1920 to present, there's a little bit of difference. In fact, NBS actually had the figures for fiscal year 22-23 in their report. And I'm like, they don't even collect the other taxes until April. So where did they come up with this one figure? I'm not sure, but my question for the council is, how many of you read the NBS reports every year? Anybody read those? Did you even know they existed before the residents of Zinfandel Ridge brought this to your attention?
We have asked, and this is the first time we've been provided the report to my knowledge.
Okay, well, just for your consideration, I'm looking at the first NBS report was a 2-page document, money coming in, money going out. I think your accountant, your bookkeeper could probably do that, and that would probably be adequate. So I agree with Councilman Kleinfelter and Margaret that it should just be part of the regular budget process, because I think the NBS charges an awful lot, and half the pages in the recent reports were like all the resumes of all the people who work for NBS, as well as the outline of Zinfandel Ridge, which I think we already know where that is. Just for your consideration, I think we could save some money because the NBS doesn't come cheap. You know, I think they should be reserved for strategic planning, regulatory compliance, things that really take a lot of homework. But an accounting thing like how much money did they collect? What was it spent on? That should just be in your software, you know, and just make that part of your budgetary planning and reports. That's my opinion. And then if we could keep track of it in-house that at any time the council wanted to, they could say like, how much we got left in there for the fire and the police, and how much for repairs at Zinfandel Ridge, you know? You'd have that available at your fingertips every year, because you only get input twice a year, December and April. Put it in the bank. Now you know how much you got. And the auditor said that with every tax levy that's given to the city, there's an itemized breakdown of where the sources were. And that should just be pretty easy to just type those into your accounting software and you'd know what was what. So that's my opinion. Thanks for listening.
Jim Fisher with REY Engineers. I happened to be out at Zinfandel one of the days that they were exercising the hydrants, and the explanation I was given is they were using them as blow-offs to try to like clean out the lines. I think when you have those large lines, you don't have a fully built out subdivision, you get stagnant water because you're not turning it over as often. But it would be something to maybe follow up. I think Amador Water Agencies is helps with the water system, and maybe follow up with them on how they're doing it. Just when I was out there, the way they discharged the one on Zinfandel, it actually ended up running down into one of the downhill lots there. Luckily, it's one under construction, and no one's there. But in the future, if the reason we saw it is we were in the backyard and we saw this water flowing on a dry day, and so we followed it right up to the hydrant, and just wanted to bring that up. So,
Thank you. Any other public comments from anybody here in City Hall? Any public comments from anybody on Zoom? Okay, I'll close this to public comment now and go back to council discussion or questions, comments on this. Okay. Then I think by consensus, we're accepting the information, receiving and filing the report. Item 7.4, update on Arroyo ditch work and direction regarding approach and whether to continue future work. And could we please get a staff report?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So tonight I'm looking for some direction from the council to kind of figure out how to proceed. Some funding was received a while back from the sand fire and then from the 2017 storms. The problem where we're at right now is the cost to restore this ditch is going to be huge. The city share would probably be, well, I didn't know how much it's going to be, but the share is 6%. So we got to figure out, do you guys want to restore the ditch? Do we want to pipe the ditch? I mean, there's a lot of options. So we kind of just need to figure out some direction. You could sell the water, you could let it go down the river and sell, you have a really good water right here. So there's some options, and we just got to kind of figure out what's the next step. FEMA did come back to the city last fall and said, city, the environmental work to do this is going to be pretty substantial. So we'll fund that, but that comes with a cost to the city too. So we just got to figure out what's the best approach to move forward. Go ahead.
When you say fund the ditch is 17 miles long. You're only referring to
The damaged areas.
the damaged area at
Sorry.
the top of the ditch, not the.
Well, it's
ditch.
kind of spread out all over. Nobody's been there for a few years, so I'm assuming there's more damage, if I had to guess.
Okay, any council discussion, questions, comments on this?
Okay, go ahead.
Go for it.
I want to address a couple of things that he said, and what the mayor just referred to is it will always get worse every year. We used to have dedicated hours to monitor areas because of, and it sounds silly, but rodents. but that's exactly what the levee districts go through every year. It has to be repaired or it leaks like a sieve. Then you end up with Corps of Engineers saying, no, 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 you're causing problems. It's an important historic ditch. It's important to a lot of people here living and that have lived here, spent a lot of time and effort making sure that it was still the city's and we maintained the right. Problem with that is Matt can say, well, you can sell the water. We can't sell a right that is not adjudicated. The only way you get an adjudication is through a court process. So that would cost money too. So that needs to be a part of this conversation. I've been to Division of Water Rights about this specific issue. They will only give you a right, adjudicate a right of what was traditionally deferred out of the consumeness into the ditch. That's all. That it's 32 cubic feet a second is so the ditch won't hold that. So how can you historically go back and say the right is this when it won't hold up in court more than likely? I'm an old timer here, so I've walked the ditch with a lot of other old timers, but I also don't want to burden the citizens with something that is constant and has to be constant maintenance if you want it. And the other part of it is I'm incredibly concerned about the FEMA grants. Money, lots and lots and lots of money have gone to these consultants with nothing getting done. We've gotten lip service. And so paying consultants to tell you something that you already know, it seems preposterous. So that's all I've got about the ditch. I mean, I think it's important, but I also am a realist.
Mike?
This is obviously many years, in the making, and I think there's definitely some pieces that are intertwined, and I think, that we're not in position to make a full-on decision tonight because there's, working and laying things out. I've spent time over the past couple of weeks doing quite a bit of research, at least what I can get available, reading and researching the West Water Report, among other things. And I think what has become abundantly clear for me is that we have a pre-1914 water right in the city of Plymouth that we've been able to maintain. It's really been, it's undisputed at this point that for lack of using that water right for a 5-year period, we forfeit that water right. We're under a disaster or an emergency exemption or an emergency deferment of that because of the sand fire and subsequent flooding and whatever subsequently happened. But if we don't do something, and I'm not 100%, I'm not the expert on what that something needs to be, but if we don't do something to recover and be able to put this water system back into use, we will forfeit a pre-1914 water right, which would mean we as a city no longer have any water rights other than from the couple of wells that we have, should something happen with AWA or anything else down the road. That this water right, maybe we do have to pay 6%, but if we can sell 32 cubic feet per second or our 21,000 acre feet at 500 or 600 or 700 or whatever the market is, probably going to be less this year since there's been good precipitation as compared to some other years. But we're looking at roughly $1 million a year of potential revenue for the city that could offset the cost take care of our share to address the ditch. But there's a whole lot of information that's missing in the conclusion on that piece. But I mean, from my reading and from me looking through this, if we do nothing, we will lose our water right. Now, something that we need to do to retain our water right, and for us to not do that would impact this community no matter what we do, will impact this community, going forward. So this is a pretty big topic, and I don't know if I have enough decision to provide direction or recommendations and down exactly what we need in terms of taking the appropriate next steps, right? This doesn't necessarily articulate tonight what that logical next step would be to be able to pin it down. But we absolutely have to I'm absolutely in support of us laying that path to be able to move this thing forward. And maybe we have a special meeting that just focuses on this, because I could see this discussion between presentations and different things that would be pretty extensive, because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of things that if we do it this way or do it, one way or another is going to determine our future, right? So, but doing nothing for me isn't an option. I couldn't imagine being here and being the ones that forfeited a water right that we've had for, more than almost 200 years now. It's 1855. So, 175 years.
I have to agree with parts of both the previous discussions. It's ridiculous to spend $1 million to only make $500,000. I understand that on the money end of it. On the other end of it, the historical value of this ditch, and for us long timers that have been here, this is a pretty important historical thing. I just don't know if we know the initial right steps to start. I have to agree with Mike on that. We have to have a game plan to move forward on this. I know with the FEMA grants and everything else, and then sand fire, and then the flood and everything else, we just don't even know where we stand with it right now, to be real honest, in my opinion. And that's all I have to say.
Doug?
This question, I think, is maybe to Councilperson Kleinfelder. I see two grants here, one from OES for $900,000 and one from FEMA for $1 million. Do we have to take both of them? I see the one for $900,000. We have to match the funds with 25%, whereas the one from FEMA, I'm sure they're very different. We're only matching with 6.25%.
You would never have to take both, but both of them combined will still not be enough to do all the repairs. And we don't have a full on, I know Matt's there, but this is not an engineering study of every piece of material, labor, all of the cost of repair. And I don't think we can make an informed decision without those. So I hope I answered your question.
It is enough maybe just to stay in the game. If we just did one of them, obviously, like you say, together, there's probably not enough money there to do the job right, as you pointed out. So
I think the FEMA grant would be isolated to what was identified in the original FEMA damage report. So we still don't have enough mats there. So I would like at a future agenda some information on if we did the FEMA grant and made those repairs, would we be able to do our diversion, which would protect the right? Diverting the water, we have a right to do. Guaranteeing that it gets all the way, the 17 point something miles is not, that doesn't have anything to do with the right. We need to divert that water to protect the right.
So Doug, on the Cal OES one, the sand fire, I believe that was it wasn't a federal disaster, it was only state, so that's why it's a bigger percentage. And the 2017 storm was a federal disaster, so that's why it's a lower percent, because the feds are gonna kick in some money too. The bigger problem we have here is easements and getting on to the ditch to repair it. That's gonna be another hurdle and battle too, to think about. But Jim Fisher's here with REY. His team was brought in a while back to help the city with this, so he could probably shed a little more light than, on it, kind of where we're at. So Jim, if you could debrief us, please.
Jim Fisher with REY Engineers. Yeah, we were hired several years back to work on the sand fire portion. We started our process with notifying the residents of like the first 4 miles of the damage, met some resistance, kind of to Matt's point, identified early on the access issues. Around that same time is when the storm damage came in, and the suggestion was made, well, for efficiency purposes and also the match purposes, let's try to roll this work together. Using FEMA dollars for as much as you possibly can, because your match is lower. A lot of stuff happened along the way, but that kind of brings us to today. We really kind of slowed down our efforts, seeing all the other stuff going on. We didn't want to spend any additional funds that, without figuring out access, without figuring out water rights. There was a lot of stuff we wanted to, work with the city on to figure out. I know, Frank, you might have been buzzing in earlier to shed some light. I think the suggestion I would make, if I were to tell, what are the first steps, is I would figure out, take the arroyo ditch off the table for a second and just figure out how to preserve your water rights. Like, that would be my step one. If that process includes the arroyo ditch, figure out what that means. Do you need to restore the whole 16 miles? Do you need to restore a half a mile? And then once we know how much the ditch needs to get repaired, then we can decide which grant or grants to use to repair it and to what level. Matt had mentioned, there's, right now the grants basically only allow you to restore it to pre-disaster conditions. Now, that's not the best way to convey water, right? You've got evaporation, you've got, other things to consider. Certainly a ditch does collect runoff though, but it also has, maintenance considerations as well. So that's kind of where I would start, is does the arroyo ditch play a factor in the city preserving the water rights? Because these are very powerful water rights, and they could be very lucrative water rights, and so you want to preserve them. Does the ditch play a factor? How do you preserve them? How do you monetize them? That's kind of what I would suggest, and hey, if it includes the ditch, let's figure out how much of it, and let's strategize the most efficient way to then repair that stretch. The way we kind of presented it to the city was, because the match dollars on the FEMA side are lower, that's what we would want to use the most of. So we know that there's only limited access points to the ditch. You're going to have to, fix a storm damage, and you're going to have to probably traverse past some fire damage. Well, maybe that contractor also cleans the fire damage up because they need to access from one point to the next, but they do it under the FEMA contract. So there's ways that we can kind of, maximize, let's say, the use of the FEMA funding to have the improvements made. And that's not just at the construction stage. The way we've scoped the environmental and engineering phase is the same way, where, we're going to send our biologists out and everyone else to go, check on the bugs and bunnies and whatever else we need to look at out there. And we're going to do that mostly under the FEMA contract, but to benefit the the state grant as well. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds of the delivery, because to be quite honest, I'm not even sure if that's in the best interest of the city. I think the step one in my mind is, how do you preserve your rights? How do you monetize those rights? Does any of that include the ditch? If so, how much? And then we're happy to, help with as little or as much of that process. But as Matt alluded to, it's a bigger process than we'd like to think, given its remote nature, given the property right access, et cetera, et cetera. But we've put together, a way to do that and implement that. It has a cost associated with it. However, we've also had conversations with FEMA about how to fund that, and they are aware that these are a lot of responsibilities that they're putting on the project, and they're aware that they are, more than likely going to need to put up more than the grant funding that's currently presented. So happy to answer anything more on it if anyone has any questions. Thanks.
I have a question. Between you and Matt, do you know how functional that ditch was prior to the fire and the storm? Was the ditch in operation to some degree prior to all this happening? Because I've heard stories that
I was gonna say,
I've
maybe
heard-
you could ask the old timers.
Yeah.
Yeah, old timers.
I mean,
Question, yes.
Yeah.
What degree?
I don't want to,
Roughly.
I can step back.
Sorry.
I just know that it served as the city's source of water for many years. But even I think after that, it was still kept up and maintained. In fact, during our research, we talked to a few of people that were out there maintaining it. We have photos of them out there maintaining it. We're able to. So yeah, we do know that it was operational. And I believe the city, I think we even found, I'm going back in the memory banks here, but I even think we found some logs of the flow data and stuff like that. So, there is, information out there on that, and the ditch was operational. John, if you want, but anything else for me or?
My comment for now would be that, it's sounding like if we do nothing, then we lose everything. And, so in other words, using, the word that's in the staff report, if we abandon this, then we lose the water rights. There's nothing that I've read or heard so far that convinces me that right now abandoning this is a good idea. So that means that I, along with others in support of moving forward, but I think it seems like I feel like there's a lot more information that we know, which has been addressed or brought up, that there's more information. Any other comments from the council? Because otherwise I'd like to open it up to public comment. And I feel a little bit conflicted here because I haven't opened it to public comment, but there are, we have the benefit of having some old timers here. You said it first.
I know.
Who might be able to answer some of the questions, but I don't want to be asking them questions and eat up their 3 minutes of public.
Right. The city did not own the ditch originally. It was owned and operated by Amador County. Amador County provided the ditch by deed to the city of Plymouth for $1. After that time, the Water Resources Control Board has had not only a moratorium on building because it was our sole source for water, but then we put in the 2 wells, and which would have been a lot easier to treat, but the State Water Resources Control Board considered the ditch our primary source of water. So for many, many years, it was supposed to be our sole provider of water unless there was dry spells, and then we would utilize the wells. So there's a lot of information. People have written books about this ditch. So, yeah, I'm with Keith. It's something that has always been very important to the city. And I think it would behoove us to figure out a way to keep the right to it. But I don't think that the city of Plymouth is ready to go bond for $20 million to pipe 17 miles. So I'm torn. I think we just need a lot more information.
I think that seems to be the general consensus. I would like to open it up to public comment.
Okay, I just want to know, is there a level of old timer? Is there like a class 1, class 2? Because I think we have I think we have the granddaddy here of old timers, so.
So I'm going to open it to public comment and obviously start with those of you who are here in City Hall.
I have a bit of experience with the ditch.
Just a bit.
It's like 70 years. My first job on that ditch was Peter Garibaldi, and I worked for his dad, and his dad was pretty miser. And he paid us for a day's work out there, 1 package of juicy fruit gum. That's it. That's it. The first time I was involved with the ditch. There was a couple of the things that to answer Valerie's questions about not having the ability to divert the full 30 cubic feet per second. That is always been a question in the past, but it's not based on the one diversion, it's based on the multiple diversions. And we have the ability to divert a 15 cubic feet per second from Middle Fork, South Fork, all the full volume of Indian Creek and the full volume of Blood Gulch Creeks. So the total of those exceed the quantity that we need, the 30 cubic feet per second. The other thing on adjudication, we absolutely have the right to market that water today. And it doesn't depend on adjudication. The adjudication would come at some point in time if somebody wants to challenge it. And if they challenge us in court, it could cost a substantial amount of money. I could talk for 2 hours on that ditch. It'll hold me to three minutes because it's going to take a little bit more than that to give you just a brief overview. The ditch originally, the reason it was successful and beneficial, it was the only supply of water for the city of Plymouth for 100 years. And the ditch was maintained and owned by the mines, and the water was critical to mining. So that was what made it profitable and manageable. In modern days, the only after we had to move our domestic supply to the water agency, the only market for that is agriculture below us. And to give you an example, the water being sold in Buena Vista, the Jackson Valley Irrigation District, I believe is like $24 an acre foot. We could not have that ditch running full bore, working today, and be able to pay for the maintenance of that thing with the revenue that we could receive out of it if it was in the best of conditions. So what we have to do is we're trying to preserve a historic water right. The value of that water right is you're going to ask what it is really is. We're going to try to establish that. There are areas that we can do that, but the best to our knowledge, the water is selling above the pumping plant for $100 an acre foot in the past. That's pretty normal fee. If you run 21,000 acre feet at $100 an acre foot, that's $2.1 million, and that would be an annual revenue if we could sell the whole thing for $100 an acre foot. We probably can't sell it all for that. There is a period of time where we'll not be able to deliver 30 cubic feet per second of water per sale. But when it is available, even in the wintertime, that water can be sold for groundwater recharge, even if there's not a demand for irrigation. So the need is out there. The market is out there. And we have very little information in the staff report, and there's very little experience with a ditch. We paid for a report. It was supposed to get us from Westwater. They're supposed to return it in 90 days, and 2 years later, we finally get some information out of Westwater, and we're going on 3 years now of that contract. And it didn't provide us with the values that we needed to know to move forward with the ditch. We can sell the water. There's no problem with the selling water. I know Doug has questioned me. We had when we were trying to market the water in the past, when we had Shenandoah Water, which was a local group that was managing that ditch and actually ran the ditch for 2 years. They claimed they spent over $200,000 in maintenance on that ditch. And then they pulled out when they couldn't get an agreement to sell water out of it, away from the Board of Supervisors. It was in our contract that we could not sell water outside the county. It took them 6 months to get that changed. And in that period of time, the water people, that district folded and pulled out of it.
John,
So-
I'm going to interrupt and respectfully ask that, I just want to point out that we're past 3 minutes, 5 minutes. So
Okay.
continue, but if,
The water is available for sale, and it's the only thing that we're gonna be able to protect that water right is, it's not gonna be through marketing water down that ditch. It's gonna be through outside sales. And the only one, there's only really two people in town that know much about that ditch. One is me and one is Jim Wise. Jim Wise is the one that retrieved the water right of the grants when they were failed under Jeff Gardner when he was here. He didn't do the reporting on it, and we lost those grants, and Jim was able to get those back. So Jim is involved. We've discussed it at length, and he has people that are interested in water. I know people that are interested in water. We've had people from Westland's Irrigation District up here and walk the entire ditch several times. And those people, the one that I'm real close to touch with, has 8,000 acres down there. And they just can't get enough water even to protect and salvage the pecan trees and stuff. So the market is out there, but we need to test that market. We need to go out and see if that market is really there. We have word from the Department of Water Resources in the past that they're not going to challenge that water right. Some of the people say, well, you're losing 80% of it. That's pretty normal in ditches in mountain counties, and they allow us that loss as part of our beneficial use. So it's really, we really don't have a problem with beneficial use at the present time. And like I said, we're exempt of that right now because of the national disaster. So what I would propose is that you put this thing on hold for 60 days or 90 days and turn it loose. We have not had the authority to go try to market this water or test market in any way. If you're allowed to do that, we would like to have time to do that. And of course, staff can research other information. One of the things that's going to come up is that the governor knew since moratorium on transfers, and we don't believe that's still effective because of the rain conditions. And the other thing is that we don't believe that the major part of the water industry doesn't believe that's appropriate in the pre-1914 water rights. So we got a water right out there that we got to protect for future use of this for Amador County. There is no water left available really in out of the McCollum River. It's mostly all spoken for. So this is the only water that we have for the future of Amador County, and it needs to be protected. The way to do that, the only way to do that is to be able to market that water down the ditch. down the river. And we'd like to take a chance to inform you some more, or gather some information, go out and test it. We would like to talk to Westlands Irrigation District and those people. That water can be sold anywhere downstream. So I would ask you to extend this for 30 to 90 days and let us test the waters. Let's not abandon this thing before we know what we're abandoning, because it is absolute future of Amarillo County. And it's the single biggest asset the city of Plymouth currently has. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other public comments?
Leonard Burns, Landrum Street. I'm not sure how much more else I can say than what he just said. I do want to give the resume of, I was on city council and mayor, and I was entered into discussions with the Shenandoah Water Group Agency. I believe I was an ad hoc member with John in those discussions. And the only two things I want to really drive home, especially for the people that are listening, not necessarily for council, because I believe you guys are going to be privy to this already, but with a water diversion, it's not necessarily that the water has to go down that ditch. We have to have the ability to do so, but it doesn't mean that water has to go down the ditch for us to sell it. Like, we don't have to have plastic bottles at the end of the line and then fill the water bottles and sell it that way. We simply have to have the diversion right, and then we can sell that water downstream. So in regard to the level of how good the ditch has to be, I mean, that's up for a really long debate that could happen. Is there comments on the phone? And then the other one was in regard to and the access of the property owners on that ditch. I do know that is an issue. It's a concern. I'm not sure how high of a concern that really is. I mean, that can be worked around. The litigation, obviously, what John had already saying is you would the possibility to have to litigate that, to have to fight for that if somebody fights you for it. But as we know, like with water prices, they're only going to increase. The city was built on prospecting. We are prospectors by nature. I would suggest that if you're not faced with a bet, don't fold your hand. So right now, nobody's putting out a bet. So you don't have to fold your hand yet. So we haven't lost anything here. We had time because we were on hold with all the situations with the FEMA money and all that stuff. And so now they can proceed. I would suggest to do the exploration. It sounds like that's what you're doing anyway. I only come up here tonight to make sure that that's where we were headed. I don't have anything more. Thank you.
So do you think the next step is to find a buyer? Step one, find a buyer first.
I think you're going to have a really hard time with marketing the water when the ditch is in such disrepair. I think that for me, if I'm sitting in your spot, I want to know what the actual assessment of the ditch is again, because I think somebody had mentioned there was quite a bit of words before me, but we don't know what it looks like. The last time I've laid eyes on it, it's been a while. So I'd say like 3 years. So I want to know what the state of affairs are in the ditch.
Just doing the work in front of us here does not put the ditch back in working.
No. So yeah, I mean, so to reiterate that portion, with talking in regards to, you basically, I think Matt was actually said it most correctly with regard to a federal incident versus a state incident. And so there were several types of catastrophic failures that happened on the ditch. They had identified them in a plan. And then they allocated FEMA funds or whatever funds they had that we could get. We applied for, got them. But then we ran into issues in the execution because we couldn't get out there to the ditch.
So basically, we're building a bridge to nowhere just to retain the water.
Well, it's there. I mean, we can actually see from point. We can see point A. We can see where the water comes out. We can see where it ends up. But yeah, maybe it's not to nowhere. This is a completely different. You're talking about a railroad. We're talking about a water ditch here. So, and the other thing too, in regard to the wells that Valerie had stated, I also questioned the structural integrity of those wells too. So like the ditch really, and I think maybe one of the reasons why I'm talking too is because when John talks, while he's an authority on the numbers and stuff, you can kind of have a sense of bias because he's in love with the ditch. He loves the ditch. Me and him talked the ditch for 4 years, and so like I don't love the ditch, and I'm not sitting here saying we should go bankrupt trying to keep the ditch. But right now, we're not faced with any bets that I see. So keep your cards. That's all I'm saying.
And the other thing is, if the ditch was in decent shape, you still have to store the water someplace. We have no reservoir. We have no place to put the water. And right now
Well, in theory,
unless we drink it.
well, you can always you can sell it downstream. It doesn't have to actually go down the ditch. That's what I'm saying. So like, you have to have the ability to divert the water, but it doesn't have to go down the ditch to sell it. And I think that a lot of people, and that's one of the reasons why I was focusing this way, is because I don't think a lot of people know that. I didn't know that when I first started on council. I didn't realize
So we spent $2 million for this work to be done.
Yeah.
That the water is not going down the ditch. We're just doing it to satisfy
Yes.
the fact that the water belongs to us.
Yes.
Bingo. Thanks.
Thank you.
One.
Funding the ditch is to
Microphone, John.
get enough revenue to pipe that ditch eventually over a 30-year period. We're not gonna need that water tomorrow or the next day. We can sell it and invest in that ditch to get a system that's usable for
Down the road.
we may not use all of it.
Thank you. Any other?
Jim Fisher with REY Engineers, just a real quick follow-up. I just wanted to also touch on the timing of things. We have already experienced both Callaway reaching back out in terms of, are you going to use these grant funds? And we've already gone through the process of extending them, more specifically with FEMA recently, and they continue to follow up and, in terms of when we're going to use them. So I just wanted to let you guys know there is, timing associated with using it. The suggestion we made to the city was, if you do want to move forward, what we would do on our end is kind of an incremental approach, where it would be like a small first contract to start looking into things further, and then also making sure FEMA is truly going to fund the additional amount before taking any additional steps. But just wanted to mention that we do have kind of a timing thing on this as well. I don't know is there a specific date that they've set? I just know that they keep following up. And
How long can you drag it out once you start the ball rolling?
I don't know. I don't think it's been quite a while.
But I do know at one point we basically the city received your grant is over kind of letter, and then we assisted with getting it reactivated or whatever you want to call it. But my fear is that the longer we wait, the more likelihood that they're just gonna finally shut it off. So just wanted to mention that piece.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
So I think as council members and everybody, this has generated questions, and if just for the sake of moving on through the agenda, if we can maybe hold our questions, email them to our city manager. And then if need be, it could be addressed in future staff reports. I do want to make sure it's still open for public comment. So I want to see if there's anybody on Zoom that has their hand raised for public comment. And I can't.
Not at this time.
Okay. So I'm going to close this to public comment for now. Thank you, everybody. Any other staff or council comments, please, Matt?
So one thing, I apologize, I didn't really explain this very well, but one thing tonight, what I was hoping to do is, or explain a little better that I didn't. So last year when FEMA came back and said, hey, you need extra studies, this and that. So I talked to Frank, and REY's initial contract, we couldn't just do that. So we put out an RFP and we got 2 firms, and we did interviews, Margaret and I and Frank and Kathleen, and we felt that REY was the best fit for that. And so if you guys still want to table, you can, but what I'd like to discuss a little bit further is, do we have them proceed with Jim's plan, like looking into this FEMA thing, or do we have them look into the water right, or what, or do we have staff look at that? So it's something to consider too, that I didn't explain very well.
I agree. Our gentleman right there, we need to know that initial starting point. I think that's extremely important.
And I know for me as a member of the council, I can't make that decision where to start. So I would, leave that up to you guys. I guess my point is that I don't want to abandon this at this point. Yeah.
So my recommendation would be to award to REY, let them keep working on this, bring something back to you guys, some more facts, and then kind of present the options to you guys. I don't necessarily think we need to look into the environmental right now. I think, do you guys still have funds in your previous contract? A little bit, maybe.
I also want to mention this, maybe off the direct subject a little bit, but just looking through all of it, I mean, this is so complex and it seems like so much work, so much very important work. And I want to make sure our city manager and city staff have the time and the resources that you need in order to be able to do this in addition to everything else we have asked of you. So if maybe at a later time, if you would just please communicate with the council on how we can support this without working anybody to death, or, this might require an adjustment in things, this might be a new priority. And so something else needs to wait, or, yeah. Valerie,
Yes.
any more comments?
I'm looking at the packet because I can only, once I scroll forward, I'd have to go through all of these pages to go back. And so Frank can probably answer this question. I don't think the agenda addresses providing REY a contract. And I also, if that was the intention of the agenda item, we should have had, the staff report should have included the RFP so that the council would be informed on what were the deliverables and how much money. So the agenda may be lacking in two things. We have to clarify the amount of money we're spending or proposing to spend on an agenda and what we're getting for it. So that was my only comment.
Yeah, I'll just say, I don't think that's definitely not part of the agenda discussion tonight, and that's why it wasn't agenda as such. This is, I think he just brought up his Matt just brought up his background by way of background that was done a year ago or something, Matt? REY contract?
The initial one was back in, when was the Sandfire?
Yeah.
Way back.
I don't know, but there's nothing on the docket tonight for the extension of the contract in any way, or a new contract or anything, so. And
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, anything that would come back at another meeting.
Any other council comments?
I think just asking the question back to staff, what do you need from us tonight in terms of direction going forward? I believe that Jim provided a great roadmap for, a step off point to get us started, coupled with what John has shared with us this evening. But I need to know what you need from us, because, do you need direction from us, or do you have sufficient direction to move forward? So
I'd like to know if you want us to move ahead with the RFP that Matt just explained, for us to bring that back in more detail at the next meeting to award the contract to REY at the next meeting, to award that contract to move forward with the additional work on the ditch.
And a question I have on that is, was it within the scope of that RFP? Did it talk about what we would need to do to retain our water rights? How much of that would include the ditch? I mean, some of the stuff that was discussed here this evening, because I think that's really the,
It did not. It was more along the lines of doing the additional environmental work and stuff that FEMA was asking to continue to keep the grant active.
So if you want us to do water rights stuff, then that would just be general direction to staff to do.
I'm sorry, say that again?
She said if you want to do water rights stuff, that would be just general direction of staff. So you would kind of scrap the options on the staff report. The one thing I wanted to say, I was looking for the right time to do it. I apologize for cutting you off. It's been my assumptions up to this point that we had to do the work in order to preserve the robustness of our water right up to whatever that amount is. I think someone said 30 cubic feet a second or whatever. That was my assumption, that the lion's share of the work needed to be done in order to robustly preserve it. The thing that's been our saving grace has also been mentioned, because, you know, water rights, and John knows this, is you use it or lose it generally in theory, but we have a good defense, not an exemption, but a good defense that we've been dealing with the disrepair to the ditch through these catastrophic events. So I think, you know, the water rights question is obviously complicated, but I think shaded around that issue as far as the thing that's helped us make the defense is that we can't do the repairs we need to do to the ditch because of the damage to the ditch, and it's expensive. So then if we don't still work towards that direction, it also undermines our defense. Because was it that reason or was it another reason? If it was sellable and marketable and usable and you could put to beneficial use in all of these other ways the whole time, then why haven't you? So I don't want to say too much more than that because, you know, I think there needs to be a closer look at it. But my point is water rights are complicated. I think everyone, Valerie, John, a lot of the council members, Jim, they all touched on certain realities related to this. But I just think if now the assumption is not, hey, we don't have to do work to the ditch like we thought, and we can still exercise our water rights with impunity the way we've always wanted to and expected to, then yeah, that would change the discussion about whether we do the work on the ditch. So I do think that's something that has to be looked at closer, because if we don't have to do the whole thing and we still feel like we can defend our water right well, then that makes sense to me. Again, my assumption coming to this meeting was based on my experience and knowledge about the ditch was that work was kind of assumed that it had to be done for that purpose, but maybe that's not.
so I guess speaking for me, then yes, I would like to see that the RFP or the contract comes back, because I think we need to do the demonstrated effort moving forward, right? Because if we're not moving forward, then the question of forfeiture is a tougher one to defend. You know, then parallel with that, I think it would be important for us to truly unpack this thing all the way down. I mean, can we go put a pump in the river upstream and have access to our, you know, our 30, cubic feet per second? Or does it require the Arroyo ditch, right? Meaning from the legalities, right? So, you know, what do we need to do to retain and defend our water rights? And how much of that, then does the ditch play, how much of the ditch plays into a factor of that? You know, I mean, I cherish and love the sentimental aspect of the ditch and would love to see it part of our community and up and working. But I mean, that's a different conversation than what do we need to do legally to defend our right and be able to move it forward. So I think if we don't bring the contract back for the RFP to continue the work and continue the environmental, we're weakening our position in defending our water right on the front, as Frank, alluded to. But also at the same time, we need to believe we need to do the analysis to really unpack what is the core deliverable we need to be. Is just simply selling the water down the river regardless of Arroyo ditch, because we're selling it as our right within that particular piece? Does that continue to retain our water right into perpetuity? Then we win-win, right? But anyway, yeah. So sorry, long-winded, but so I think that's the two pieces. I'd love to see the contract back. And I think we need to really unpack what we need to retain for our water rights and then what factor that, you know, how big of a factor, if any, does the ditch play into preserving those rights? Before I say the third time. Circles.
And I think that's what, if I remember correctly, that's what Jim had said at the very beginning, that would be a recommendation for the first step is to look at the water rights and what do we need to do to retain those? So did you have a comment? If not, have we given you enough direction or have we? Okay. I feel like we've been all over the place.
Make sure that's not Mike's direction. I want
I said we. Valerie, any last comments?
I agree with moving forward and looking at an RFP, but I also would like to have in that same staff report the costs that the city has gotten so far and how much of that, if any, has been charged out to the FEMA grant. And so all of that information in front of us in order to make an informed decision.
And is that reasonable? Is 2 weeks time reasonable? Okay, awesome. Thank you. 1 week.
This week.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
We're at a special meeting.
Okay, anyway.
Tomorrow night.
Anyway. Okay, so let's move on. Does anybody, are we okay just to go through it? Okay. Item 7.5, consider approving a proposal and authorizing the city manager to enter into agreement with MBS for a citywide development impact fee study for $40,050 and a proposal for 4 annual reports and 1 5-year mandatory impact fee report for $30,750. Staff report.
So Government Code Section 66006 requires that local agencies that require payment for development fees, which we do, submit annual and 5-year notices detailing the status of those fees. The annual report has to be made available to the public on the website within 180 days of the end of the fiscal year. In September of 2021, Assembly Bill 602 was passed and signed into law, creating many new requirements. The city is due for its 5-year report plus its annual report. MBS has made a proposal to do a comprehensive impact fee study, which we have not done for 15 years. Some parts of the fee structure has been modified. This is something that the council tasked me with as a goal to do a comprehensive study. In addition, NBS also made a proposal to do the reporting for the city. The cost of the study is $40,050 to do the reporting of the 5-year plus the annual reporting. For the 4 additional years, it's $30,750, which would be spread out over the 4-year period. Staff is requesting approval of all 4 of both studies, and I can answer any questions that you have.
Any comments, questions from council?
Well, I'd like to know if an RFP was prepared for this and the several other contracts from this same firm that are on this agenda.
No, an RFP was not done.
This council has, even when RFPs are not necessarily required on certain actions that we may take, this council hasn't expressed an interest in doing RFPs so that we know that we are getting the value, the best value we can with public funds. So I'm concerned about the number of contracts. I'm concerned about the sole source of collectively all of these contracts, and that no RFP was prepared.
And I share those concerns. I think RFPs are important for a number of reasons. So I'm wondering if we asked for an RFP or RFPs to go out. Because I know that's a process that can take some time. How would that impact this?
Well, since it's been 15 years, I think waiting a couple of months is not going to be an issue.
That's a pretty good point.
It's been 15 years since it's been updated, but it's not been 15 years since we reported.
Right.
The 5-year report is a little overdue. We don't have capacity within the staff to do that report. It will delay a couple of months to do this.
I'll just add on the AB 1600, which is the first of these things. I think we also have the citywide fee study, and then was the development impact fee study for those, and the water wastewater. Probably the AB 1600 one is just as a factor for you to consider, not trying to push you either way, but just so you know, it's probably the one that's the most sensitive as far as we're already behind the ball with the legal requirement to have that done. So it needs to be done. The 5-year report's a big deal. The other ones maybe not as a rush, although maybe the wastewater one, it's kind of time sensitive too, but at least with the water and wastewater one, that's just a desire to get it done sooner than later. This one, we are kind of behind the ball a little bit as far as those reports. So just want to make sure you appreciated the difference between the different studies legally.
And so we're already behind with AB 1600. We would be further behind. And so we get a letter from somebody saying you're behind, and what would be the worst case scenario?
We could potentially have to pay back impact fees to the developers.
I didn't really want to say that out loud, but yeah, that's okay. It can be a big deal.
Okay, but we're already in that.
Yeah, so we'd like to cure it as quick as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I ask how this firm was selected?
They've done this study for Plymouth in the past, and they've done good work. I've used them in agencies before. There's only a few firms in the state that do this kind of study, and this firm is well known for doing good work in this area, and that's why I chose them. And like I said, they've done work for Plymouth in the past. They're the firm that did the previous study in this area.
Well, I think everyone can appreciate my concern about the optics to the public of the single source and the cumulative amount of money that we are being asked to vote on without RFPs.
And I appreciate your point, Valerie. I think under the circumstances, and obviously I only speak for myself, that at this point, I would be able to support moving forward with this, but just, I guess, want to go on record saying I would have preferred that an RFP go out, and that would be our practice moving forward. But Margaret, at the same time, I also appreciate your reasons for choosing this firm. And knowing that, you know, the city has done work with them for years and you've worked with them in other agencies, that gives me some helps me. So thank you.
The council can also choose to just do the 5-year and the annual report for this year and not do the additional 4 years for the annual reporting.
And there's no legal requirement to do the development impact fee study either. So I mean, that's a $70,000 price tag in this staff report. You could probably reduce it by 55,000 if you just want to do the immediate reporting right now. So it's smaller. And then you could do an RFP later. That would at least stop the bleeding on this year.
Yeah. And then I'm wondering, would what are they called? MBS? Would they be agreeable to that? Or did this kind of come as a package deal?
No, in this particular staff report, there's 2 proposals. There's the 4-year reporting is one, and the 5-year and annual. I did ask, and they could be separated.
Okay.
So there are those 2 components.
Okay. I'm good with that compromise. Or that suggestion. Does other Mike comments, thoughts on this?
So on that last, that was specifically talking about the impact fee 5-year and 1 year, correct? We weren't talking about, or was that including the other? I guess we're just focusing on this agenda item at this point, correct? Or was that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think in fairness to the city manager as well, the last I checked, we don't have a policy that requires RFPs to be done for anything. Now, we believe it's in good practice and good faith that we want to get there, but we need to set the standard and adopt a policy that outlines purchasing practices and be able to get us there. But even with that being the case, a lot of this is we're bailing out a boat that's been taking on water, right, over the past few, whether it's been the Zinfandel CFD or among other things. And so I think this is an important step for us going forward. That the risk, as been mentioned with its impact fees, that I think, we absolutely need to move forward and then work and set ourselves up for success for properly doing bids, quotes, and RFPs going forward.
Any other council? Doug? Valerie, any more?
Well, I've been racking my brain about this, and I agree that I don't like to get the city to get letters from the state saying you haven't done your job, you haven't done due diligence in your reporting requirements. But on the other hand, if I were to vote for this, I would like to see it for the 5-year study with added to that contracts the options for the other portions. So when we fulfill the requirement and then we have an option to move forward on the other things or not to.
Councilmember Kleinfelter, do you mean the 5-year and this year's annual and then the option for the next 4 years?
Yes.
Thank you.
And so instead of approving both of those items, it could be an appendix to the 5-year contract as an option.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Is there anybody here in City Hall who would like to comment on this? Okay, no comments here. And I don't think we have anybody on Zoom that has their hand up. Okay, I'm closing it to public comment. Not even paying attention. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion? Unless y'all need to think about that public comment.
I'll make a motion. We approve the expenditure to complete a citywide development impact fee study, AB 1600, and the mandated annual reporting of the impact fees. Let's say, who's for? Frank?
I mean, you can say as presented if you want, but I'm not sure if that's, we'll see if that gets traction with your colleagues.
Yeah. Would you repeat that, please?
Well, it sounds like you were making a motion to basically adopt staff's recommendation.
I was, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
then you can just say that and then you can see,
As staff's reported, yes.
yeah, and then you can see if it gets any
Exactly.
traction.
Ask a question real quick.
Technically, no, because we have a first, we need a second, but I'll allow it.
Yeah, or I'll second it, and then I have a question. Just clarification that the 30,750 for annual reporting is divided up over the next 4 years. So it's not $30,000 per year. It's $30,000 divided up, making sure I understood that.
That's correct.
So with that economics of scale, we would have, yeah, so yeah, my second stance.
Okay, do we have could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember White,
Yeah, it needs to get done. Aye.
Councilmember McLaughlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kleinfelter,
No.
Vice Mayor Sim,
Aye.
Mayor Ackerland.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, item 7.6, consider approving a proposal and authorizing the city manager to enter into agreement with MBS for water and wastewater rate studies in a combined amount not to exceed $95,475.
So this study would be to study the water and the wastewater. And it's broken up into two components, water being one component, wastewater being another component. And this would lead all the way up to the Prop 218 to be able to pass on to the ratepayers the increase that we've taken on from AWA for the increase in the water rates. You can do both components, the water and the wastewater. You can do one or the other, both, none. The water is $47,425. The wastewater is $48,050. And staff's recommendation was to do both, get the Prop 218 going so that we can pass that on to the ratepayers and start recouping some of our funds.
Okay, thank you. Council comments, discussion? Go ahead.
My comments are primarily the same as with the last agenda item. We haven't done a 218. I know we need to because we've got our wholesale rates have gone up, but I want to see this go out with an RFP.
Doug?
I understand that our wholesale water rates went up. I'm a little concerned, I'm curious. Why are we talking about the wastewater funds as well, passing on additional charges for wastewater?
It's been a while since we've checked wastewater rates and
You know, but how
that's the
long?
purpose.
Okay, so that our costs have gone up in terms of labor,
Yes.
electricity, et cetera. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mike, comments? Keith, comments?
Time sensitivity to this issue. That's, what is the weight with anything real time sensitive, or could it go out to RFP and not?
Wait a long time.
Yeah.
It's council's
It's
council's decision. It's not. It's not
Okay.
time.
Yeah, I would just say relative to the previous item where we were behind, no, not the same, but the previous item, we were behind as far as legal mandates. This is more just council discretion. The longer you wait, obviously, the longer you're gonna have the chance to recoup the cost of increasing, but that's a council decision. Staff really can't. Margaret can't speak for that. That's a council call, but there's no legal
There's not, that's.
violation that's occurring right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up for public comment. We have none. From anybody here in City Hall, nobody on Zoom. I'm closing it for public comment. Any more council discussion? And I feel the same way about the RFP. But at this time, I would entertain a motion. So is it the,
I'll make a motion. The water and wastewater rate studies plus connection fees to include Prop 218 public hearing notice as per the staff recommendation.
Adopt staff's recommendation as presented.
As presented, thank you.
is there a second motion? I'm not hearing,
I'll make a second.
okay. A roll call vote?
Councilmember White,
Nay or no, because of the RFP thing. That's
Count-
how I feel.
okay. Councilmember McLaughlin,
Yeah, no, also, we'll do an RFP.
Councilmember Kleinfelter,
No.
Vice Mayor Sim,
Yay.
Mayor Ackerland.
No.
Motion does not pass.
So then can we just give direction that we'd like an RFP to go out for this?
I think that's a consensus. That can
Okay.
be consensus.
I didn't know
yeah.
if I had to say it to make it
No, I-
official or if it's implied or obvious. Okay. Item 7.7. Consider approving a proposal for a citywide fee study and authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with NBS in an amount not to exceed $37,575.
So this is for a citywide fee schedule. I noticed there's a lot of fees missing from our current fee schedule. That fees that we could be receiving that we're not charging for. And so this would be a comprehensive fee schedule to try to recoup fees that we're leaving on the table. It's a total cost of $37,575. There is no time sensitivity for this item. It'll take MBS approximately 204 hours, and it's council's decision for this item.
Any council comments?
I'll start this one.
Okay.
I have a feeling it's gonna go the same way as the last one.
I'd be happy to do an RFP on this as well.
The only thing, I mean, it'd be more out of transparency than anything, because I think that the $37,000 rate to do a comprehensive user fee study is just based off of my experience. That's a good that's a good contract. So, yeah, I mean, I'll support the wishes of the council, whichever way we'd like to go on that, but it's just a great piece. We're not, I can't see us beating that, not with at least a quality firm.
Good like reasonable, right? Good like reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, and I feel the same way as regarding the RFP. Unless you have something you'd like to add, I'll open it for public comment.
I know where it's going. I'm good.
Okay, any public comment? There's no public comment from anybody here in City Hall. Did I go too fast? Valerie, I don't know if you could see, but the only one in City Hall is my husband.
Oh, and he better not.
There is, I don't see anybody on, oh, is there any public comment from anybody on Zoom? Okay, looks like we have another spouse. So I'm going to close it to public comment. And
I will get to those as soon as I can. It will take me some time to write those.
we understand. Okay. 7.8. Consider who will make public convenience or necessity determinations regarding certain alcohol beverage control applications. Staff report.
So staff received a letter from the alcohol beverage control asking who the council would like to designate, if anyone, to make the decisions for certain types of licenses, off sale, public premises, certain club types. And the council can designate the planning commission, myself, they can designate themselves.
And if there's no designation,
And if there's no designation,
ABC decides.
ABC decides.
And this is a lot of cities have stuff in their planning code that talks about public convenience and necessity findings. We don't have anything in our code that we could find that deals with it, so we had to bring it to the council to make the policy, and maybe we'll have to do it may be best practice, just do a text amendment to one of our codes to clean it up, to codify it, but at least this would set the direction. There are certain types of off-premises alcohol licenses where if ABC determines there's an undue, I guess you would probably know about this better than anybody. If there's an undue concentration of, I was referring to the one person in the gallery tonight, Councilmember Kleinfelder. But if there's an undue concentration of off-premises sales, alcohol sales in an area in a census tract, as they define a census tract, then they send it to the locals to determine whether or not it would serve the public convenience and necessity to allow this. So that's the only time it would come before the city, and we don't have anybody designated as the contact, so that's why ABC is asking. Some cities have the planning commission make findings, some have the city council, some allow the city manager to make that determination, or the planning director. It's council's call.
Any council discussion?
Since this is a code issue, I would like to see it kicked to the planning commission to review what our current policy is or lack of current policy and make a recommendation. And I still would recommend to the council that the planning commission be the body that makes these decisions.
That's what I was going to say.
I think that's a consensus because I agree with her.
Hold on one second, though. I think she said there's a deadline. We don't hear from you.
Is that,
Not clear on this.
yeah, is that the plan
Maybe it's 90
would
days.
decide who's gonna make? Who's gonna be this designated person? That's-
Oh, let them decide that.
Yeah.
Why can't we get it over with? Make it mark up? Or can I suggest that? Well, should we, nothing to do, so we should give them something to do.
Valerie, I think we're just taking a minute to let Frank and Margaret read something,
Okay,
picking something up.
if it is time sensitive, I would have no problem recommending that we designate the planning commission so that the designation goes off to ABC, but then the planning commission convenes to actually review the policy and make recommendations on the municipal code to the council. If that makes sense.
Margaret, other cities, who normally does this sort of thing where you've been in the past? The city manager or who? Huh?
Planning director or the city manager.
My recommendation would be you, but that's.
In my experience, Doug, I've seen it actually more at the planning commission level. So I think it just depends on the city. It's gonna be a mixed bag.
Okay.
And just my 2 cents on that is we've got a group of dedicated people on our planning commission. We need to give them some work to keep their interest, to get them together, some little bit of forming, storming, norming, performing. So
I would agree with that.
Okay, so I have to open this to public comment. Maybe there's somebody here in the public who would like to do it.
I am Don Ackerland. I have a question. Zinfandel Ridge in Plymouth. My question is, with this type of designation, would it make difficulty for like the Rotary Club when they fill out their 1-day applications for beer and wine type sales, or would that have any impact?
No, these are, I forget that, I think it's type, I want to say type 21 off premises sales, but that's for a permanent license, not those temporary
Okay,
uses.
not temporary.
These would be your convenience stores,
Okay,
that kind of stuff.
that was all.
Thank you. And any comments from anybody on Zoom in the public? No. Okay, so I'm gonna close it to public comment. And I do think, does everybody agree that we're gonna hand this over to the planning commission?
I think there's a consensus to designate the planning commission, yes.
My consensus is good, but is it to the planning commission and then the planning commission review it to maybe make a modification to the municipal code?
Perfect. Okay. Item 8, council staff communications. And so 8.1 city managers report.
I just wanted to let everyone know that my grandson, daughter, and I went to the rodeo and we had a fabulous time. I forgot to bring the plaque in here that the rodeo presented thanking the city for its donation. We're gonna hang it in here somewhere on the walls in this area. Don't know if you guys noticed, but we're trying to clean up City Hall. We've cleaned up the bulletin boards and we've hung up name plaques outside offices so people can see whose offices they're going into. We're trying to make City Hall look more professional for those coming in to do business. And that's all I have.
Did you speak at the rodeo?
I did not, but I did go out into the arena to receive the plaque.
Awesome.
That was a the city, well, what was funny about it is my wife are in a moving of a business right now, and I was over there working, but my wife was at the rodeo. We're moving her business, but she was at the rodeo. I was, and she goes, "Who's the lady with the red glasses from the city?" And I said, "What?" And I said, "Oh, that's our new city manager, Margaret." And she goes, "Did you know that you guys were getting an award?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Oh, well, she was there getting it." I'm all, "Oh, I let her know that I couldn't be there. And I have a feeling all the other council members were busy and stuff like that." But it was noticed by our citizens. I will say that I thought it was pretty funny. And then, yeah, I heard that the rodeo was pretty phenomenal this year. My daughter's boyfriend, he's a professional bullfighter. He fought bulls at the rodeo this weekend. So he said, "Man, you guys got a deal out there in Plymouth. That's a pretty cool
Fighter or bull rider?
bullfighter."
Was it well attended?
It was.
You were there Saturday, I imagine,
Saturday, yeah.
pretty much. It rained Sunday, right?
Yes.
I would like him to find another profession.
Mayor and council member reports, and then we can combine this with council requests for future agenda items. So I'll start with council member Kleinfelter.
I have nothing to report tonight, and I will email in any requests for agenda items.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McLaughlin.
I don't have a report. I know that John Colburn was here this evening and had mentioned something before the meeting about wanting to do a presentation at the second meeting in April on the blue zone. And I think he was going to bring it up under public comment, not realizing the special meeting requirements. So maybe if we could just check with him to confirm.
I already have that on my future agenda sheet for the second meeting in
I'll just shut up.
April.
Councilmember White.
No reports. Of course, I'm gonna say Hawksview again. Because I can and I will. And I will John, with the blue zone thing that Mike brought up, the statistics that he's given me is pretty insane. And I am seeing two people who are very important in my life right now who do not get the exercise that they need, that they are staring at the end of their lives. And I don't know why it's impacting me right now, but it's really impacting me that we at least hear this presentation.
Councilmember Sim, report or request for future agenda items?
I have no report either. I've been kind of out of town for about a week and a half, so I was unable to attend a couple of meetings that I would have had I been here. No, I have nothing right now. Thank you.
And then the only thing that I have to report is that Senator Alvarado Gill, her office has reached out and asked to meet with me, which I feel honored. And we have a date coming up. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the date is. So the 7th, thank you, April 7th. So, we'll share with you what I think she just wants to get to know us. And that's all I have. So with that, the meeting's adjourned.
We did it.
Yeah.